At that moment, Dr. Joe decided to conduct a thorough examination of the body, as everything seemed too unusual. Only now did she notice that the patient's body remained warm, raising even more questions. The girl chose to check our hero's breathing with her finger to confirm her suspicions. Finally, Linmu awoke from a prolonged slumber that could have been eternal. Dr. Joe was unsure how to react to such an event, and Howell was equally stunned. Meanwhile, the nurses, now terrified, believed the living dead had come for them. The doctor urged her colleagues to stay calm, explaining that they shouldn't be shocked, as the patient might have experienced clinical death. The protagonist was now sitting on the operating table, wondering who all these people around him were. The young man glanced around, his eyes scanning unfamiliar walls as his mind desperately grasped at fragments of memories. He struggled to recall any details about the events that had transpired. In the end, Linmu realized he couldn't even remember who he was. After regaining consciousness, he was moved to ICU room number 303. Dr. Joe was so astonished by the situation that she stayed close to this remarkable patient. The girl began to suspect that the needles might have damaged a point responsible for memory. She theorized that the injury could be so severe that he had literally forgotten his own name. The doctor reassured our hero not to worry, confident that his memories would eventually return. She informed him that Linmu could press a button to summon a nurse if he needed anything. Eventually, she left the protagonist alone, as she had other matters to attend to. The boy was left in complete silence, allowing him to rest after such a grueling night. When he awoke, he realized he couldn't sense any spiritual chi in this place, and his body felt weaker than ever. It seemed someone else had occupied his body, using the last of its chi to escape and create a new form for themselves, or else they would have perished. He never imagined that the greatest cultivator in the world would meet such an end. The young man was furious at the Xuantian and Yugi sects for their audacity, vowing to return to the cultivation world to confront every last one of them. Meanwhile, the Lin family mansion had received the latest news from the hospital. One of the uncles behind the incident was furious that his nephew was still alive. His subordinate reported that the boy survived but had no memory, which slightly reassured the man, so he instructed him to handle everything, promising a generous reward. Linmu's aunt, Lin Rong, couldn't understand what was happening, as it was previously said that Linmu couldn't possibly survive. Apparently, the brother had no answers either, only knowing that the young man had lived but lost his memory. Upon hearing this, the woman began to hope their nephew was now a mere vegetable. Her uncle chuckled at her confusion of memory loss with complete paralysis. Lin Rong wondered what would become of them now and suggested they needed to adjust their plans. The man understood that his sister was the closest to Linmu, so he asked her to visit and check on the boy, emphasizing that they shouldn't reveal themselves until they confirmed the extent of his memory loss. Meanwhile, Linmu sat quietly in his room, unaware of the schemes being plotted against him. The silence was broken by a knock at the door, and the young man promptly invited his guests inside. The protagonist couldn't grasp what was happening, so he asked Dr. Joe the reason for her visit. The girl explained that someone had come to see him and asked if he recognized the person. Pointing to the bandage on his head, Linmu stressed that in his condition, he couldn't remember anyone. Lin Rong pretended to be hurt by his words, but the young man simply apologized, saying he had no recollection of her. She told her nephew not to worry and advised him to rest to recover quickly, promising to visit again later. She also asked the doctor why the boy looked different somehow. The girl explained that our hero's face was injured from the fall, requiring minor surgery. Lin Rong thanked the doctors for their efforts and asked them to care for her nephew, though in her mind, she was already rejoicing that Linmu had indeed forgotten everything. A few days later, the young man was still in his room, trying to learn about this world. Our hero discovered that humanity had existed here for only 5,000 years, yet its spiritual chi was remarkably weak. Thanks to a book he found, he was slowly beginning to understand this place. Dr. Joe reported that the protagonist was nearly healed and could soon be discharged. Linmu sincerely thanked the doctor for the care and support she had shown him throughout these days. The girl chuckled, noting that the young man acted as if he came from some ancient era. Embarrassed, he realized she had uncovered his secret love for martial arts stories. The doctor urged our hero to complete his discharge to spend time with family and friends, hoping it would help restore his memory. Following the doctor's instructions, Limu headed toward the hospital exit. A cab was waiting to take the young man to his destination. He was genuinely surprised that this world had so little spiritual chi, yet humanity had advanced significantly without it. Soon, the car stopped outside the main entrance to Donghai University. The protagonist checked his pockets and realized they were empty. The cab driver informed him that the fare was 50, but Linmu had no way to pay. He explained that he had just left the hospital, leaving him without money. The driver was stunned, as he hadn't expected this from a student of Donghai University, where the wealthiest and brightest studied. He suggested that our hero call a friend to cover the fare. The young man grew embarrassed, unsure if he even had any friends. The protagonist was at a loss, as he didn't know anyone at this university. Suddenly, a girl appeared at the car window, seeming to recognize Linmu and noting they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Linmu saw this as a perfect chance to resolve the situation, so he explained his predicament and asked his friend to pay for the cab. The girl didn't mind helping and assumed her friend had been in the hospital for plastic surgery. The protagonist asked her to pay first so he could exit the car and explain everything properly. They strolled around the university campus together, after which Linmu described how he ended up in the hospital. He also mentioned falling from his own balcony, which seemed particularly strange given everything else. Hearing that he remembered nothing, the girl realized he had forgotten not only the events but also her. The protagonist was instantly embarrassed and apologized for not recalling his longtime friend. She asked if the doctors had mentioned any way to restore Linmu's memories. The young man hadn't heard of any such method but hoped his memory would return. The girl noted with a hint of sadness that memory loss might not be so bad, as sometimes she wished she could forget everything. At that moment, they encountered Dutch Xiao Yui, accompanied by her friends as usual. The girl averted her gaze from the protagonist, who inspired nothing but disgust in her. For a brief moment, her eyes fell on the young man's face, and she immediately noticed a change in Linmu. Dutch Xiao Yui instantly assumed our hero had undergone plastic surgery. The young man grew embarrassed, as she wasn't the first to notice, and tried again to clarify the situation. His friend stepped into the conversation, confirming that Linmu had indeed had surgery and remarked that he looked quite handsome. Dutch Xiao Yui only laughed off the young man's choice and stressed that she still wouldn't marry some lowlife, even after surgery. The protagonist then realized that the previous owner of his body was engaged to this woman. Linmu immediately proposed breaking off their engagement, as he had no objections to such a move. Dutch Xiao Yui and the friend were stunned that the young man had made such a bold decision so suddenly. Linmu confidently declared that he would never want to marry someone like her. Naturally, the university's main beauty tried to act unfazed by such words and only remarked that it was quite courageous of the young man. He wanted to end the engagement completely so the girl would never bother him again. In turn, the protagonist's friend laughed and supported such a daring choice. Linmu was frustrated with this kind of attitude and now hoped he would never cross paths with Dutch Xiao Yui again. The girl couldn't take her eyes off the young man she had previously deemed a loser, as she hadn't expected such a drastic change. Meanwhile, his friend was thrilled for our hero, who had finally achieved a small act of revenge. Now the young man learned that before his memory loss, he was a weak and depressed individual, easily bullied and humiliated by others. The friend emphasized that it wasn't just intimidation but genuine shame each time. The protagonist realized that Dutch Xiao Yui had always wanted to end the engagement herself, and he had simply let her go for nothing. The friend believed this girl was unworthy of more and wondered what Linmu would do next. She thought he might regret his decision, as his fiancée was the university's queen, but in truth, he didn't care at all. The girl decided to wrap up the conversation and advised our hero to steer clear of Dutch Xiao Yui in the future. She also promised to guide him to his class, as it was clear he didn't even remember that. On their way, someone hurled a sharp dart toward our heroes, which halted just inches from the girl's eye. Fortunately, her friend had honed reflexes and easily caught it with 2 fingers. It was Chinhao, whom the girl had repeatedly warned not to play with darts in class to avoid injuring classmates. The boy was genuinely frightened, having angered Tangbei, who was also the class head, and promised it wouldn't happen again. The girl stressed that her classmates' skills weren't impressive enough to show off in public. She decided to use the dart she caught to demonstrate proper technique. In the end, Tang Bei struck the target with astonishing precision, leaving no room for error. The protagonist was amazed by this accuracy, noting it rivaled the level of the foundation dimension. After that, the class head reintroduced their classmate Linmu to everyone. She explained that he had been injured, causing memory loss, and urged his classmates to help him recover his memories. All the students greeted the main character with enthusiastic applause to offer him some support. Linmu noticed that Tang Bei wasn't such a bad person and was quite popular in their class. His introduction was suddenly interrupted by a knock at the classroom door. Moments later, the teacher, about to begin the lesson, entered the room. The woman, smiling, asked her students if she had missed anything significant. Linmu immediately assumed it was another classmate arriving late. Tang Bei burst into laughter because her friend had mistaken instructor Xiang Ju for a student. The protagonist was surprised by this mix-up, and meanwhile, the teacher asked the student to accompany her since he had returned to the university. The class head wasn't pleased that her classmate was ignoring the teacher and shouted for him to hurry up and go with Miss Song. Song Ling-ro had already heard about what happened to the young man and asked if he was okay. Linmu thanked the teacher for her concern and replied that he was fully recovered. She was glad to hear such news and added that he could always visit her office if he needed help. The young man appreciated the offer, but their conversation was cut short by another knock on the door. It was Tang Bei, who came to check if they had finished talking, as she wanted to have lunch with our hero. Mrs. Song reported that they were done, so the students could head to lunch, and she thanked Bei for her assistance. The girl was delighted by her teacher's praise and felt it was her duty to help his Linmu's classmate. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood up without a word and headed for the exit. Song Ling-ro watched the students leave and thought that not only had the young man's appearance changed, but his personality seemed different too. On the way to the cafeteria, our hero decided to comment on how well his friend threw the dart, suggesting she must train a lot. Tang Bei explained that, with her training at home, the simple trick came naturally to her and asked if the young man wanted to practice. Excited by the offer despite his memory loss, he replied that training would be good for him. The friend examined the protagonist closely and immediately noticed his body was stronger than before. The changes were significant, as if Linmu had trained rigorously for a long time. The girl didn't realize that falling from a balcony could have such a positive effect, but the young man wasn't thrilled, as he had nearly died. She agreed that it certainly wasn't worth his near-death experience. Seeing his friend become upset thinking about it, he asked her not to take it so seriously. Then Tang Bei grew curious about what our hero planned to do next. Linmu calmly responded that he had no plans, as he couldn't recall anything from his past. The girl tried to find a positive angle, asking with a smirk if he had ever wanted to live his life differently. The protagonist froze in confusion, realizing he had never tackled such a profound question before. Tang Bei revealed that the old Linmu was an introverted weakling who couldn't stand up for himself and was constantly bullied by people like Dutch Xiaoyui. In contrast, the current Linmu not only looked different, but had a completely transformed personality. The girl believed this accident was a divine chance for him to change and start anew. She suggested he seize the opportunity, given his newly enhanced body. The young man, surprised, asked his friend what he needed to do to change his life. A slight smile appeared on Tang Bei's face as she seemed to have a plan ready. She asked if he had ever heard of a mysterious organization called the Dragon Protectors. The protagonist was taken aback by the strange name. The girl explained that she needed to mention the martial arts world first. She directly asked if Linmu believed in people who could kill with mere leaves. The young man immediately assumed these warriors used spiritual qi and confidently replied that he believed it. The girl earnestly warned her friend that such people were hard to find. She shared a legend about masters who reached the Xiantan dimension, noting that even her grandfather had once come close but was defeated by his inner demons, losing all his cultivation. Thankfully, he survived, to the joy of their family. The main character urged Bei not to be sad, as her grandfather's survival was what mattered most. The girl listened to Linmu and mentioned that their Tang family had many talented individuals, hoping someone would reach the Xiantan dimension. The cultivator was surprised to hear of a familiar organization and thought his friend might be part of the Sichuan Tang. Tang Bei laughed and playfully poked his forehead, amused that he likened her to the Tang sect from martial arts novels. She confirmed that their sect of poison and hidden weapon masters existed beyond fiction. At the organization's peak, they had several Xiantan experts who were formidable warriors. Limu hadn't expected this and immediately asked how powerful these people were. The girl, drawing from her grandfather's tales, explained that all techniques were crafted by these fighters. Our hero deduced that these yin experts matched the foundation dimension level and asked if such masters were in their sect. His friend clarified that the dragon protectors were established by the Xia government for special missions, which is why some sects sent disciples to the team to advance faster. Even Tang Bei herself coached such a team. The protagonist hesitated, unsure if he could join without being in a sect. The girl reassured him that his potential, combined with proper training, would make him no weaker than their recruits and asked if he wanted to join the dragon protectors. Limu pondered whether to make such a spontaneous decision. In the end, the bold young man firmly stated that he wanted to live a different life. Their conversation ended there, and the event shifted to late at night. The protagonist found himself outside the grand building of Tang Long Corporation. The young man was surprised that the organization's base was in the city center. Tang Bei saw no issue, as it was ideal for housing a key government agency, allowing quick responses in emergencies. The young man realized his comment was foolish and agreed that his friend was right. Soon, they were inside the Tang Long Corporation building, heading toward the elevator to reach the upper floors. Seeing the massive scale, our hero realized this was the organization's base. Meanwhile, the girl pulled out her card to verify her identity. Swiping it across the elevator panel, which required special identification. A second later, a notification appeared on the screen, indicating that the required files were loading. Tang Bei began entering the necessary information while explaining that Tang Long Corporation was merely a front. She asked the protagonist to wait a moment to see its true scope. Unfamiliar with such technology, the cultivator was startled when the elevator began descending rapidly. A second later, a bell signaled they had reached the correct floor. When the elevator doors opened, Tang Bei announced they had arrived at the Dragon Protector's base. Beneath the ground was a vast room where numerous organization employees worked. The girl wasted no time and led her friend to the office of one of the Dragon Protector's leaders. The man sensed an unfamiliar presence and woke from his sleep. Surprised by the late visit, he immediately asked what Bei was doing there at such an hour. Meanwhile, our hero noticed a glow of spiritual chi from the old man, indicating he had surpassed the foundation dimension and reached the energy-gathering dimension, though he was still far from the next level. Tang Bei explained to Uncle Yang that she had brought a rare martial arts genius, a person of extraordinary talent rarely found among thousands of masters. The man was annoyed, thinking the girl was joking by introducing her boyfriend and insisted it was too late for him to learn martial arts. She quickly clarified that he wasn't her boyfriend and suggested the leader test the main character's skills himself. Uncle Yang couldn't resist sweet Tang Bei and decided to trust her words. He approached the young man, placed a hand confidently on his shoulder, and looked intently into his face. To his amazement, the man found that the boy had an exceptionally strong body, despite lacking martial arts skills. Tang Bei was thrilled, as her claims were validated, and added that Lin Mu used to be ordinary, but after the fall, his body had become far stronger. Uncle Yang's eyes widened in disbelief, as it sounded utterly impossible. The young man himself didn't fully understand, as the hospital had tried everything but couldn't explain the reasons for these changes.